Okay, let's start today with something that feels like a real contradiction in, modern luxury cars.
Hmm.
We're talking these highly engineered vehicles, right? Cars costing $80,000, maybe $100,000 BMWs, built for precision, for performance, and yet they keep facing these huge mandatory recalls. And for what? A component that's been basically standard since like the 1920s to a starter motor?
Mm-hmm.
This just seems wild, like a space shuttle that can't launch because the key breaks off in the ignition.
It really does. And that perfect absurdity, as you put it, that's exactly where we're jumping off from for today's deep dive. We are really getting into these persistent, multi-layered starter recalls hitting BMW right now, and persistent is the key word. Our mission isn't just about counting up the, hundreds of thousands of vehicles affected, though that's part of it. It's more about doing a really granular analysis using our sources to understand the crucial technical differences between these two completely separate component failures.
Right, because we've got this comprehensive summary that details the scope of these two distinct recall events. One involves one supplier, one specific risk profile.
All right.
And then there's this newer second recall, different supplier, similar symptom overheating, but a technically distinct failure. So yeah, this data lets us get properly informed on what's actually going on under the hood.
Okay, so let's set the scale first, because the numbers here are, well, they're huge. BMW just announced a new recall. It involves 145,102 vehicles. I mean, that alone is a massive figure for a luxury brand.
It really is. But then you have to put that alongside the previous starter recall. That one hit nearly 200,000 cars. And if you look at the data we have, that earlier one was so broad, it even pulled in some examples of the Toyota GR Supra because it's mechanically related.
Wow, okay.
So, yeah. You combine these two events, we're getting close to 350,000 vehicles caught up in starter issues in, pretty quick succession. That's genuinely a staggering number. That's almost enough cars to cause a traffic jam from New York to Chicago, seriously. All because of a part that's supposed to be, well, bulletproof. Okay, so for this new recall, the latest one, which specific models are we talking about?
Yeah, what's fascinating here is the specific group in this new 145,000 vehicle event. It covers quite a range of BMW's popular models. The 2020 340i, the 2020 through 2022 740i, the 2020 to 2025 840i, and significantly, several of their big-selling SUVs, the 2019 and 2020 X5 and X7, and also the 2020 X6.
Right, that's basically BMW's bread and butter these days, isn't it? That high-volume SUV segment.
Exactly. And while the models seem varied, the sources suggest the common thread is likely the straight-six engine family. And when you talk volume drivers, the BMW X5 alone, that accounts for over 80,000 of these newly recalled vehicles.
80,000, wow.
Yeah, then the X7 is next. That's about 25,000 examples. So if you happen to drive one of those really popular big SUVs from those model years, this data is extremely relevant to what you might need to do.
Yeah. Okay, but relevance, you mentioned that. We have to look deeper than just the model, right? Because the real shocker here, I think, is that this isn't just one problem repeating itself. It's actually two different component flaws causing the same symptom. Overheating starters. This is where those supply chain details get really, really important.
Absolutely critical. You've got two major global suppliers here, Valeo and Denso, and they've introduced two separate failure mechanisms into BMW platforms. Understanding that technical difference really explains why the risk assessment changed so much between the two recall events.
Okay, walk us through that.
All right, let's start with the previous recall, the one that felt, frankly, higher risk. Those faulty starters came from the supplier Valeo. The issue there was a physical compromise. Water could get into the component.
Okay, water intrusion.
Exactly, leading to potential short-circuiting inside the starter itself. And a short circuit, well, that means immediate, uncontrolled energy release. Extreme overheating.
And that physical short, that must be why NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, took that really unusual step. They actually told owners of those specific cars to park them outside, away from buildings. That's a huge deal. It signals a pretty immediate fire risk.
Precisely. That was the, let's call it, the severe water damage Valeo scenario. Now contrast that with this current new recall. The faulty parts here are from Denso. And the sources are very clear. The mechanism is different. It's not about water damage causing a short.
They both overheat, but NHTSA isn't saying park outside this time. Why not? What makes the Valeo water short so much worse than this Denso issue if they both can overheat?
It comes down to the trigger and the sort of immediacy of the failure. The Denso failure mechanism happens like this. The driver tries to start the car, the starter fails to crank the engine properly, and then the driver naturally tries again immediately. It's that sequence, the repeated start attempts, that overloads the electrical system within the starter itself. Think of it like, I don't know, repeatedly jamming the power button on an old computer that's frozen halfway through booting up. You're just forcing too much current through circuits that aren't ready for it.
Ah, okay, so you're frying it from the inside through repeated action rather than an external factor like water causing an immediate short.
That's a good way to put it. The Vallejo short could happen sort of passively anytime water got in. The Denso failure is more of an induced sequential electrical failure. It needs that specific multi-attempt trigger.
Which makes the immediate risk profile lower, even though obviously an overheating starter is still serious.
That's the key distinction, yeah. Because the mechanism is different. Even though the new Denso fault still carries, minimal possible risk of fire if surrounding materials ignite. Neither BMW nor NHTSA is recommending owners park outside this time around. That change in public guidance marks a major difference in their risk assessment. And it's really crucial to add, while we're talking fire risk, the data so far is reassuring on one front. Thankfully, no one has been hurt or killed in relation to either of these starter recalls.
That is genuinely good news, yeah. Okay, but let's talk about maybe the biggest complication in this new Denso recall story, because this isn't actually the first time BMW tried to fix this specific electrical overload problem, is it? They tried before, and, well, it seems like it really didn't work out.
That's probably the most critical piece of information here, you're right. The documentation we have shows this new 145,000 vehicle recall actually includes cars that were already recalled for the exact same issue back in August of last year.
Wait, really? So they recalled them, supposedly fixed them, and now they're recalling them again for the same thing?
Exactly. It tells us pretty clearly that the initial fix was simply inadequate.
And what was that initial fix? It wasn't swapping out the starter back then, was it?
No, it wasn't. The first attempted solution was just a software update. BMW's engineers, likely thought they could manage the power flow using code. The idea, presumably, was to reprogram the engine control unit, maybe change parameters for the cranking sequence, or limit power on those subsequent start attempts, trying to prevent that overload scenario.
So basically, a cheap and fast software patch. Instead of replacing potentially 145,000 physical starters, they tried using code to compensate for what sounds like a physical hardware weakness. I mean, that really speaks volumes about that constant pressure for cost saving in modern car design.
It absolutely does. Look, when you're faced with a potentially massive component failure recall, the lowest cost and fastest fix is almost always going to look like software first. But the data here shows the clear limits of that approach. By March of this year, BMW realized the problem hadn't actually gone away. Reports were still coming in from the field.
Okay, so what does that failed software fix really mean for us, as drivers? We see this trend everywhere. Cars are basically computers on wheels now. When a manufacturer tries to patch over a fundamental physical issue like an electrical component's tolerance with just a digital workaround, doesn't that kind of erode trust in the whole computerized car platform?
Well, it definitely raises important questions about systemic integrity, doesn't it? When you have a clear hardware vulnerability and the first attempt is a software patch, it can suggest, rightly or wrongly, that maybe speed and cost are being prioritized over true long-term reliability. The failure of that patch ultimately just confirmed what many critics of this software-first approach argue. You often can't just code your way out of a fundamental physical hardware problem. The underlying vulnerability was still there, just waiting for that specific sequence of events to trigger the overload. They learned, perhaps the hard way, that the patch wasn't enough, which inevitably forces us into the final definitive resolution now.
Okay, so we've established the software fix was a bust. What's the verdict now for owners of these, very popular X5s and X7s and the other models?
The lesson learned seems clear. Only hardware can truly fix a hardware problem in this case. So the mandatory resolution now for this Denso starter issue is definitive. It requires a complete replacement of the starter unit itself. They'll be installing a new design, one that fundamentally addresses that internal electrical system's weakness, its susceptibility to overheating during those failed start attempts. A simple software update. That's off the table now. It's no longer considered sufficient or, frankly, permissible by NHTSA for this issue.
That definitely sounds like the right move, finally. But wow, that's a huge commitment of parts and labor from BMW. Okay, so for you, the owner listening, the practical takeaway here is pretty straightforward. Like any safety recall, this starter replacement will be completely free of charge. You should absolutely never pay a dime for this fix.
That's right. And your local BMW dealer should already have been notified about this new recall action. They should be ready to schedule the replacement pretty much immediately. Timeliness is still important here, even though the immediate risk profile is lower than that previous Vallejo recall. You want to get failing hardware addressed.
And you don't necessarily have to wait for something in the mail, right?
Right.
BMW will be mailing out formal notifications to the owners of affected vehicles. But if you know you own one of the models we talked about from those specific years, you can and probably should be proactive. You can call BMW directly. Their number is 1-800-525-7417. Get the specific info for your car. Or you can always check the NHTSA website using your VIN or call them at 1-888-327-4236. Just get it scheduled and get it resolved. Hashtag tag outro.
So, stepping back a bit, the core knowledge we've gained from this deep dive today is, I think, a pretty powerful lesson in global manufacturing complexity and also in risk assessment. The main takeaway is that even issues presenting with the exact same general symptom in this case, an overheating starter can have fundamentally different root causes. And those causes can depend entirely on which supplier made the component. We saw the contrast. The high-risk, immediate water damage short-circuit potential from Vallejo versus the high-volume but sequential electrical overload failure mechanism from Denso. Two different paths to the same problem symptom.
It's truly wild, isn't it? That two separate, really massive recalls stem from the same supposedly simple part, sourced from two different major global component giants. And, that leads us perfectly into our final provocative thought for you to maybe mull over. Given that we've had two major distinct starter recalls affecting hundreds of thousands of luxury vehicles in pretty quick succession, and given that the faulty parts came from two completely different major suppliers, Vallejo and Denso, does this truly suggest the issue is just isolated down to specific component failures from those suppliers alone? Or could it possibly hint at something broader, maybe a systemic electrical load issue, or some kind of design dependency challenge that's inherent to the underlying vehicle platform itself? Perhaps pushing these components, regardless of supplier, right to, or maybe even beyond their intended design limits. Just something to consider next time you see one of these popular BMW models out on the road.